Welcome back to Green is Good, and we're so excited to have with us today Melody Badgett. She's the managing director of 1%fortheplanet.org. Welcome to Green is Good, Melody.
Thank you, John. It is a pleasure and an honor to be here.
Well, before we get talking about your wonderful organization and the great work that you do there, talk a little bit about Melody Badgett. Share with our listeners, your journey leading up to this great position.
1% for the Planet sits right at the intersection of business and the environment. And I say that because I think for me personally, my heart's always been in the environment and nature, and my career path prior to 1% has always been in business. In the world of consulting and large companies and global reach, all of which was fantastic experience. But, at the end of the day, it wasn't where my heart was. And that became really evident to me when I went to Patagonia, tip of South America.
Yeah.
About a decade ago, my parents said, "You're going to the end of the world by yourself where you don't speak the language." What? And it was on a rafting trip down the Futaleufú with a wonderful company called Earth River Expedition that really focused on highlighting the value of indigenous populations to drive economic growth rather than damming rivers. So very experiential, had local politicians aboard, and, short story long, spent nearly 2 weeks in the most incredibly beautiful, pristine wilderness, rafting, camping, and seeing really no other humans but those on the trip. And I got back, and I could no longer sit at my desk, quite honestly. It just felt like the problem was too urgent and the opportunity too great, and the time was now. So I joined 1% in 2007. There were 3 of us at the time, and today our staff is 12, and our reach is 48 countries, and I have never looked back. Yeah.
Unbelievable. That's a wonderful story. And for our listeners out there that want to follow along as we share the story of 1%, please go to www. I'm on it right now. It's a beautiful website. 1% for the Planet, spelled out, 1%fortheplanet.org. Melody, first let's just step back one little step. How did 1% even get started? Who started it? How did it get started?
Yeah, that's another very fun story to share. So it began on a fishing trip 10 years ago. Founder of Patagonia, Yvon Chouinard, and his best buddy, Craig Matthews, who owns Blue Ribbon Flies in Montana, were fishing the Madison, and they said, you know what? Every time our companies do something good for the environment, it's good for our business. And companies really have a role to play here. More of them should. So the model was conceived. It's a very simple model of giving 1% of sales every year to causes you care about. And it began within Patagonia, stayed there until 2005, and became an independent entity at that time because they saw the momentum and they said, this is bigger than one company. It really needs to live on its own. It needs to have a chance to be a global entity. And today it's reaching to 48 countries.
Well, I'm on your website, and so explain to me, because this is really, like most of our listeners out there, I want to learn how this works. Explain how the basic 1% for the Planet model works.
Right. The model is simple and I think beautiful in that. If a company is interested to be a part, they simply contact us, let us know of their interest, and go through a really easy sign up to become a member. It's a 10-minute application. It's a very nominal member dues, and then they basically, with that membership, commit to giving 1% of top line sales every year. So that's a big number, 1% of sales. And, it's quite different than profits because it's year in or year out. It's whether you're making money or not. It's part of your philosophy and what you stand for. Another very unique part of the model is that giving happens directly between the company and the nonprofit. So they write the check to the causes they care about. We advise and help per request. And then every year, once a year, we certify all of our networks. So they send to us receipts saying, we did the giving, it's at 1% of sales, and they tell us their stories of the results of their partnerships with these nonprofits. And, we certainly engage and help facilitate those when and wherever possible.
That's awesome. Are there different ways that companies can get involved besides that basic model, or is that it?
Yes. Another really great question. The basic model is that membership model where a company joins.
Yeah.
But we also realize, the environmental problem, the crisis, it's a big one.
Mm-hmm.
And that means we need a network that's big and inclusive and available for companies of all sizes to participate. So not only can you join as a company, but you can join as a brand, or you can join as a product line. And these options make it very accessible for companies of real size, billion-dollar companies who have brands in the multi-millions or product lines in the several million-dollar range can be a part because of these iterations. And they're really important to the reach and the resources of the network.
That is great. Okay, so some shameless plugs here. Talk a little bit about some of the bigger accomplishments of 1% for the planet.
Yeah. I think one thing we've just reached our 10-year mark, so entering our second decade, second phase of growth, and one thing that feels really amazing about those first 10 years is the fact that the network of now just over 1,100 companies throughout that decade has given $100 million to causes. And that's a pretty cool milestone to achieve. Now, Yvonne, our founder, will tell you, in one breath, yes, that is amazing. We never thought we'd get here. And in another breath, that is just the tip of the iceberg. And he's absolutely right.
Yeah.
But it feels good to make a start because less than 2% of all giving goes to the environment and less than 4% comes from companies, and that's the case today. So that's an enormous needle, right?
Okay, that's wonderful, a wonderful neon sign for, like you said, the journey of the great marker for where you've been and a great beginning for where you're going to go. Mm-hmm. And so now let's go back and talk a little bit about philosophy of the organization, though. Yeah. So you're talking about businesses giving 1%. And as you say, Melody, that's a sizable number for whatever your business is. And then the intersection with environmental nonprofits. In many, settings, that seems a little bit like strange bedfellows. Talk a little bit about why that could be also magical and why it could really be great and why it works for how you've married up these organizations.
Yeah, strange bedfellows that should know each other better, right?
Yeah.
And I think, it can be a really beautiful marriage, honestly, because you have one entity, the company, that has vast resources, that has a lot of power and influence, and then you have another entity, the nonprofit, that's on the ground doing amazing work at the grassroots level, really making change happen. And if you can marry those two, if you can get resources and influence funneled toward that very positive change that's happening, the opportunity is vast. So, I think that's what we see here, and the power of strategic philanthropy for companies. Okay, so it has to be a good business decision because some companies are capitalist and put that first, especially if they're publicly traded. They have a bottom line to uphold, and it needs to be a good business decision for them. And if you do philanthropy well, if you're really strategic about it, if you create a portfolio that aligns, in the countries or communities in which you operate with issues that tie to your product and your supply chain, it can be a very rich and meaningful story, and it can add depth and dimension to your brand. It can create something with which your customer wishes to align and be a part. And we've seen historically the impetus of values-oriented customers to really support companies who care about something more. So
let's give some shout-outs here. I want you to share some of your more proud examples of partnerships that have happened in your network today, so we could hopefully inspire our listeners who are teetering on wanting to get involved and wanting to do something like this. Explain some of what you've seen really work out there.
Yeah, good. Great question. And I'll say, in our second phase of growth, the second 10 years, we are thinking a whole lot about impact. And so much more than just writing a check, but how do we really enable that change? Because as a network, and the more we grow, the more we should be able to do together what we cannot do alone. So, on the one hand, some very good examples to share, and another, I think we're very excited for where it will go and how it will build. And these partnerships, they can happen at a bunch of different levels. They might be one-on-one with a company and a nonprofit, or they might be pulling many constituents of the network around an issue they care about. So I'll share an example of both of those. Let's see, the first, there's a company called Caudalie. They are a beautiful company, French-based, with a presence in, I think, about 25 countries and a significant and growing presence in the U.S., and they make natural skincare products. And when they joined 1% 2 years ago, they said, everything we stand for is about the environment and sustainability, and we're ready to give back, and we haven't done that yet, and we want to be really strategic about it. So help us. And in 1 year, they contributed over $1 million in brand new giving to the environment, and we along with them helped to build a portfolio that was very thoughtful about balancing. They gave a lot to reforestation because there's paper used in packaging, and they gave a lot to habitat protection around palm oil production to save elephants and tigers because it's a small ingredient in their product. But they wanted to be really mindful, create projects with impact, track results, and tell a story that would inspire other companies to be a part. And they have a beautiful presence on their website that does just that, and have really been a role model for other companies. And beautifully so as well, that company is growing because consumers really see a lot of value and love to align with companies who stand for things like that. A bigger example, more broadly network-wide, is in the water space. We have engaged with several companies and nonprofits around something called Change the Course, and it's focused on the Colorado River and putting water, millions of gallons of water back in the Colorado so that it can actually reach the sea again. It's galvanized. Bonneville Environmental is the lead nonprofit on it, and they've galvanized lots of companies like Silk and Coca-Cola, and National Geographic is a big player, and Participant Media is one of the social media partners that are a part. And what they've done is bring these all together, and 1% has been instrumental in helping recruit the companies and get others in our network to be a part of this as well. And all are coming together around a social media platform to really build awareness on the Colorado and enable individuals all over the country to take action. So via pledges and really smart, clever social media outreach. They might email an individual and say, "Did you know your closet is flooding?" And you open that and it tells you, well, it takes 740 gallons of water to make every T-shirt in your closet.
Oh, my gosh.
And then lead you, very thoughtfully through, here are the things you can do in your life to reduce your water footprint. And so very actionable. And then Bonneville is also doing key water projects all over the country that actually put water back into the Colorado. So when you make a pledge as an individual, you tie directly to the result and the aim, of more clean water and a full-flowing river. And it's getting a lot of traction because of the magnitude of the players involved, the reach they have, and their ability to really clearly share and tell the story in a very actionable way.
I love it. And so for our listeners out there that just joined us, we've got Melody Badgett on right now. She's the managing director for 1% for the Planet. It's www.1%fortheplanet.org. Talk a little bit about this, Melody. There's lots of environmental groups out there. I mean, they seem to be sprouting up from everywhere. And how do you get involved with a certain amount of groups and qualify them? And what's your unique approach to marrying up those groups with the businesses that are donating?
Very good questions all. So the screen for nonprofits to be approved in the 1% network is a really simple one. And that's intentional, again, because our desire is to be inclusive and to get funds to as many organizations doing good work as possible. The primary lens for us there is an organization whose mission is at least half focused in sustainability and the environment. And that's important, too, because we know that doesn't happen in isolation. So there might be, social or economic elements, but those things together, when they're working in collaboration, tend to really make change. So that's our primary lens. I think the unique part of the network where it really comes to bear, and gauging effective nonprofits and who of these, all that are out there, are really moving the needle. The network votes with its dollars, if you will. So the giving that happens from those 1,100 companies every year goes to nonprofits who are effective, to those who are sound financially and doing unique things in the marketplace, because that's where the companies want to align and support. And that's evident. So I think it's a really unique way that the network can communicate.
Melody, we've got about 4 minutes left, and I always love to, you have such an amazing organization, and I could stay on the line with you for 2 hours today and just keep chatting, because I'm just fascinated by all this great work you're doing and how you're marrying up deserving nonprofits with really mission-based businesses and with that have really visionary leaders. Talk a little bit for our listeners out there how they can get involved, how individuals can get involved with your wonderful organization.
Mm-hmm. Yes, individuals are hugely important. In fact, at the end of the day, all change really starts with the individual, right? They're the consumer of the company. They're the supporter of the nonprofit. I look at Lori David. She was one woman, and because of her voice, Al Gore decided to make Inconvenient Truth. And because of that, the whole country has much better awareness of the environmental crisis than they ever did before. So really powerful. And we've engaged with the consumer over the years in the vein of creating and sharing a music album, something very accessible. 40 artists gave us rare and exclusive music, and by sharing that with individuals, they could hear it and share it online with their friends and download it in a very green way. It was all digital on Amazon and iTunes, and we said, there's something there. That's really powerful. We need to equip and enable that individual. Today, at this moment, consumers can give back to the organization. It's easy right there online. They can support values-oriented companies that are really caring about and demonstrating through their giving the planet. Patagonia and Cliff Bar and New Belgium Brewing and Mountain Equipment Co-op, these are all members who have wonderful customer followings, I think, that are really closely tied to that. And then going forward, we this year are really excited about stepping up our ability to engage with individuals in a really meaningful and lasting way. So I'd say, be on the lookout going forward. We're going on a big chunk of Jack Johnson's U.S. tour with him. He was our 50th member and living example of just a beautiful person that cares about the planet and everything they do. And we are blessed and fortunate to have him as a part of the network, but just to, show up alongside them. They're incredibly passionate, he and his wife, Kim Johnson, about plastic-free living and getting healthy foods to kids in schools and educating them about the environment. So we're lining up with them at their concerts in person to talk to fans individually and via social media to engage again, those fans in really accessible ways that they can care about these things too. And we're on our partnership agenda and that impact equation, thinking a lot about how do we do that? How do we make this environmental equation really easy for individuals to participate in and help them to enable them to make change too. So more to come. Hopefully, we have our sights on an individual program at 1%, so an individual can really be a regular and ongoing part. And we're excited to see how that unfolds.
Well, that is really awesome, and we're down to the last minute or so. So, any one or two companies, or 3 or 4 companies, you want to give a shout out to for our listeners to support that are great supporters of 1% for the planet. Yes.
Many of those we've talked about, I think, are really great ones for our members to align with. Horny Toad is another that's a new member of the network we're really excited about. Anu Footwear.
Okay. Well, perfect, Melody. Then I'm going to have you back, and we're going to continue to talk about the next 10 years of 1% for the Planet. For our listeners out there, www.1percentfortheplanet.org. Get involved and help make the world a better place. Thank you, Melody, for making the planet a better place for all of us. You are truly living proof that green is good.